Okay, next thing we're looking at is the negative index. So let's have a look at a pattern and see if we can get something from this pattern. So I'm going to start with 10 to the power of 3. So hopefully, you know, that's 1,000. What about 10 to the power of 2 or 10 squared? Hopefully, you know, that's 100. What about 10 to the power of 1? Well, that's just 10. Now 10 to the 0, we've done this before. Anything raised to the power of 0 is 1. So what's happening here? So if I wanted to continue this pattern, I'm going here, I've got 10, the power of 3, 2, 1, 0. So following that pattern, my next power would be 10 to the minus 1. Then it will be 10 to the minus 2 and 10 to the minus 3. Now, what happens here when we've gone from 1,000 to 100? How did I go from 1,000 to 100? And how did I go from 100 to 10? And how did I go from 10 to 1? Well, what's happening every time? To go from 1,000 to 100, we've divided by 10. Then we do the same thing. To go from 100 to 10, we've also divided by 10. And if I'm going from 10 to 1, I've divided by 10. So we're following the same, in order to follow the same pattern, we need to go down here and divide by 10. So what happens if I get 1 divided by 10? I get 1 over 10 or a tenth, or you might write that as 0.1. It's the same thing. Now keep following the pattern, divide by 10 to go down to the next step. Divide by 10. And what do we get? A tenth divided by 10 is actually 100th, or you might put 0.01. And following the same pattern, 100 divided by 10 is 1,000th, or 0.001. Okay, so now the next step is, can we see a connection between the index and the negative index and the index, and a connection with those fractions when we rewrite them? So let's have a look here. 1/10 is the same, I'm going to write it over here, it's just 1/10 to the power of 1. 100th is the same as 1 over 10 squared, and 1,000th is 1 over 10 cubed. So if I have a look here, the connection seems to be -1 goes to 1 on the bottom, -2 goes to 2 on the bottom, and -3 goes to 3 on the bottom. So from all that, we can see if we raise something to the negative power, it's the same as putting it under 1 and having that power positive. So let's go with this pattern. So what would that mean for, say, x to the -1? It means I put it under 1 and the power becomes a positive 1. I don't need to write that power. I can leave it as just x because it's the same thing. Well, let's keep following this. What about if x to the -2? It would be 1 over x to the +2. Or if I had x to the -3, 1 over x to the +3. So following that down, if I had x to the negative any number, n for any number, it would be the same as 1 over x, that number, but it being positive. And that's the general rule for a negative index. So let's try rewriting some questions. So, like before, if you want to try these without me going through them first, just pause the video and give it a go. So let's rewrite these. It says rewrite the following using a positive index. Okay, so x to the -4, a negative power means you put it under 1 and the negative power becomes a positive power, x to the 4. A, doesn't matter what the base is, this time it's a to the -3. So it's still 1 over a, and that becomes +3. Now, even if it's a number, so the base is now 3, we can still put it 1 over 3 to the power of +2. This is an m. Next one, got m here to the -1. It's 1 over m to the +1, which you can write over as 1 over m as well. Both of those are the same, it doesn't matter. Okay, things change a little bit over here with question E. This says 5 times m to the minus 1. Which number or which base has the -1 happening on it? It's only the m. So the 5 stays up the top, but the m goes under and goes to the power of 1, or you can just write it as 5 over m. Either is fine. Then what's different here, the next one in F, everything is to the -1. So it's 1 over everything to the power of 1, which is just 1 over 5m. So what changes for G? If it's all to the -2, it's still everything because it's got these brackets here. Okay, so it's 1 over 5m squared, because that -2 becomes a +2. And if we wanted to, that's the answer like that is fine, but we could write it as 1 over, so the 5 is squared and the m is squared. Okay, what if we want to do it the other way around? What if we've got these questions and we want to rewrite them using a negative index? So again, pause it if you want to try it yourself first. Let's start with question A. So I have 1 over x to the 5. It's a positive index. If I want to bring it up, then I need to bring the 5 power has to come to the top, but I have to change it to a negative when I bring it up to the top. Okay, what about question B? 1 over y to the 8. Again, if I want to bring the y up to the top, I need to make the power negative. Now, what's different about C? On the top, instead of having a 1, I've got a 3. So the 3 stays there. It's already on the top. And the y needs to come up, but the 5 becomes a -5. Over to question D. Both these things are on the bottom. Now, what's that power here of the A? Don't write it, but it's a 1 there. So when I bring it up to the top, A becomes to the -1 and B is to the -3. And now for E, slightly different again, but this time there's a 3 on the top. So the 3 stays there on the top. This A does have a power of 1, just like it did in D. When I bring it up to the top, it becomes a -1 and the B becomes a -3. On to F. Now everything is on the bottom this time. Before, you look here, before the 3 was on the top and it stayed on the top, yeah, okay. This time the 3 is on the bottom, so it has to stay on the bottom. So we need to go 1 over 3, and this A does have a power of 1. If we're going to bring the A up to the top, we bring the A to the -1 and the B to the -3. And you can leave it written like that if you'd like to, or you know that timesing something by 1 doesn't change anything. So it's A to the -1, oops, B to the -3, all over the 3 stays on the bottom. That last one's a bit tricky.